We're continuing in our little series here on biblical leadership. If you have your Bibles, go to Ephesians 5 here. We're going to be bouncing around a little bit today on our topic. So we started off, we talked about, remember that first week, we talked about the importance of vision. I don't know if you guys ended up writing a vision statement down for yourself or your spiritual life or different areas of your life. We talked about how important that can be. Mine was to know Christ deeply and to have my outer life and my inner life congruent. That's kind of my vision for my spiritual life. I want to know Him deeply. I want my outer life, how I live, and my inner life to be in alignment. I don't want that duplicity between the two. And so it's a lifelong process, isn't it? All right, so that's mine. But we all have to think about, what does my vision statement look like in terms of what I want for my life? And so we talked about that. What was the word? Remember the word that Paul uses? It's translated as my goal. What's the word that Paul uses? Remember, scopon? It's the word like for a rifle scope, right? It's so clear, you know what your target is. That's your goal. That's your vision. So we talked about that. Then we talked about the importance of taking initiative. That biblical leadership is about being willing to act and take action. We looked at James. Faith without works is dead. You can say all day long what your faith is. You can say all day long what your vision is. But if we don't take action on these things, then it's dead. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a nice pipe dream. And so we talked about the importance of being people of action. Last week we talked about character. Remember, we talked about character. We looked at Proverbs 31. Chayil, it's a word in Hebrew that means noble or virtue or excellence. It's translated as character in Hebrew. And we walked through all of these virtues of the noble wife. And we said these are traits that aren't just for women or for wives. These are traits that apply to everybody who's pursuing a life of great character. And we said character is the ability to take the hard road over the easy road. Just out of curiosity, did anybody face some hard roads this last week when the easy road was available? All right, that decision that you had to make between the hard decision and the easy decision, that decision is a character-forming moment. And even if you took the easy decision, you can still learn and grow from that, because hopefully there's a conviction in that decision that makes you say, I don't want to make that decision anymore. And so you can gain the fruit of the Spirit, which is a conviction that you want towards holiness and righteousness or whatever it is that decision was about. Right? So we're confronted by this every day. Hard decisions, easy decisions, the space in between is where the forming process of character occurs. And so as believers in Christ, biblical leadership is recognizing that every moment of every day is a character forming opportunity. So today we're going to talk about another element of biblical leadership that is, I think, every bit as important, and it's what we face every single day. What is the one thing that I don't care, I don't care who it is in the world, everybody's given this. It's the same thing. What are we all given that's the same? Time. We may have different amounts. Some might live to be 100, 80, 60, 30, but we all get the same amount of time every day to do the same amount of work or whatever it is that we choose to do. And so the ability to manage time is an incredibly important discipline in the Christian life. I don't know about you guys. Anybody here ever squander some time? Anybody here look back and squander some time? Anybody here never squander a day? You ever squander? You probably never squandered a day, did you? Yeah, all of us can look back and go, man, if I could get some of that back, man, I've squandered. I know when I looked at my life, literally the first 21 years, in a lot of ways, I squandered self-discipline. It wasn't until my senior year in college that I began to be discipled for the first time in my life. I had a guy in 2'7", his name is Greg Bott. This guy was like 6'8", and he spent a year. Remember those days? And you went through this 2'7" program, and he just began to invest in me and spend time with me. And I still remember the time he took me to Bullwinkle Steakhouse and told me to bring my grade report from North Texas. And he looked at it, and I remember he just chastised me. And he said, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. I had like a 2.21 GPA going into my senior year. And he looked at that and he goes, I remember he goes, these are disgraceful. And he had earned the right to say that. And he chewed me out a bit. He's like, Walter, we spend a lot of time together. You are bright, you're intelligent. I can tell by all the times we talk. These grades are not fitting for the man that you are called to be. And I remember that last semester of college, it was the first time in my life I never had a C or a D on my report card. I had a C or a D on every report card since pre-K, if they had it in pre-K. I mean, I made all A's and B's. I walked around cocky that semester on campus after I made that 3.2 that semester. It bumped me to a 2.31 GPA. That was my graduating GPA at North Texas, not Yale, at North Texas. All right. So I understand the squandered life. I understand, and it wasn't like because I got discipled suddenly, all of that just suddenly got taken care of. It became a journey of managing the appetitive desires of my life, of managing my appetites and my desires, and God using time to begin to mold and shape me. And I'm 54 years old today, and I am still a deep work in progress. I'm just kind of curious, is anybody here a deep work in progress still? I just want to know who's with me. Okay, all but one of us. That's great. Okay, let me show you my favorite poem. I'm going to read it to you on time. This is actually on a sundial at Wellesley College. It's on a sundial when you walk up to the campus, and it's the sundial talking. And it says this: the shadow by my finger cast. What's the finger? It's the dial. The shadow, I know, very rudimentary here, guys, sorry. The shadow by my finger cast divides the future from the past. Before it sleeps the unborn hour. What is that? That's the future. Before it sleeps the unknown hour. In darkness and beyond thy power. Behind it, its unreturning line. What is that? It's your past. The vanished hour, no longer thine. 1 hour alone is in thy hands. The now on which the shadow stands. Pretty good. What's the point of the poem? What's it saying? What's it telling these students when you walk on campus? What's that sundial screaming to every student that walks on that campus?
Make it count.
Make the moment that you're in count, right? Quit being a dreamer. Quit living in the past. Look at the present moment, because the present moment is the only thing that's forging what's ahead for you, right? So it's time management. Every year, a survey is sent to leaders. If there's one thing you wish you were better at, what would it be? Time management is always at the top of the list. Man, I wish I was better at managing and prioritizing my time. Stephen Covey wrote probably the most famous time management model of all time. Y'all remember his model? It's famous. Remember what it was? What were his 2 categories? They were really great. Y'all remember that?
7 Habits.
Well, it was in the 7 Habits. Yeah. And he talked about important things and urgent things. Remember that? Yes. Important and urgent.
Big rocks in our matrix. Big
rocks, that's right. There you go. Now you got to dust that stuff off. Big rocks, little rocks, right? And, here we go. Hang on, Scott. He talks about this idea that in life, anything is urgent that is demanding your time now. And the question is it important or not? I've kind of adapted or modified it a bit. And I think the idea is, we have a lot of important things in our life that we have to attend to. I think the key to real excellence in this area is not just identifying what's important, it's identifying what's most important in that moment. Because right now, do we all have important things we have to attend to? You have something important today you got to do when you get done?
Sure.
This is important for you, or you wouldn't be here. When you leave here, you're going to go do something important, right? We all have important things to do today. The key is, how do I structure my day in such a way that I live in the space of the most important time more often? And if I can live in the space of the most important more often, I'm going to be able to make the most use of my time, the now on which the sundial stands. Does that make sense? Look what Paul says in Ephesians 5:15, verse 15. He says, pay careful attention then to how you walk, not as unwise people, but as wise, making the most of the time, or some of your Bibles might say redeeming the time. That's the word. It's the idea of, it's the word used to buy something in the marketplace for some future benefit. That's what a wise person does. And he says, making the most or redeeming the time because the days are evil. So don't be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Notice the contrast, not as unwise, but as wise people. What is wisdom? I've asked this question weeks ago. What is wisdom? The Bible talks about knowledge. It's the application of knowledge. That's right. It's going to be one, understanding, but it's the use of that understanding. I define wisdom this way. Wisdom is insight towards the good and living accordingly. It's insight towards the good. Does this decision lead to the good in my life? And if I know that it would lead to the good, but I choose not to do it, what do we call that? Unwise. If I know this is good for me, if I know this is what I should do and I don't do it, the Bible will call that foolishness sometimes, depending on the degree to which it's unwise, right? Foolishness is simply a degree of a lack of wisdom, is all foolishness is. It can be unwise all the way to foolishness. And so Paul is talking about here that, listen, our time is limited. Pay attention. Right? Literally, it's look carefully at your days. Look carefully. The word time, it's interesting, is used over 900 times in our Bible. 900 times it's used. And whenever you see time, time is something that God set in motion at creation. And here's what's fascinating. As you begin to read your Bible from beginning to end, one thing you notice is that God uses time for the sake of process over end results. God will get the end results He wants, but God is more committed to the process of what's happening. Why did God leave Moses in the desert, in the wilderness for 40 years? That was an 11-day journey, by the way. Did you know that? That's an 11-day journey from where he was to get out of the wilderness. 40 years. Why did He leave Moses in there for 40 years? You ever seen the map, by the way? You ever seen that funny map of right? That was Moses, right? With his circus in the wilderness. Why? What do you think? 40 years. Not 6 months, not a year. 40 years. Yeah. What do you think, Bo?
I think it's because God didn't want that generation to have the land because of their idolatry and unfaithfulness.
Okay, so did those people need to be refined? Was there something about them that needed to be refined? Yeah. What about Moses? Yeah. Did Moses have some issues? Yeah, Moses had a lot of issues. He was impatient. He murdered a man. He was impatient. He was angry. He was disobedient. And God just took Moses, and He was so committed to helping Moses become the man he was supposed to be, that in the book of Numbers, Moses himself, some might say it was an amanuensis that did it, but Moses himself in his book writes what about himself? He was the what?
Most humble man ever.
The most humble man who's ever lived. And I think he probably wrote that with humility if he meant it.
Isn't that
Self-refuting?
Yeah.
It could be. Some think that it might have been an editor who added that into Moses' account because of his humility. Regardless, what we know is that was probably written towards the end of Moses' life after he had been beaten up. You guys ever gone through a season of just kind of really being beaten up and learning some lessons in life, and the product of that is humility? What do you think?
Yes.
Yeah. Look, I can remember, man, just as I was a younger guy, unfortunately, I was full of a lot of what they say, stuff and vinegar. And I love to debate and argue, and I would go toe-to-toe with people. And I used to go to campuses and do on-campus debates with professors, and I would go, and I was just a very, very engaging, outspoken believer that was going to carry the sword for Christ. But on the inside, there was so much that was unrefined in me. And God needed the inside to look like the outside. See? That's what he needed. And so he had to go to work and allow some things to happen. Galatians 6, God will not be mocked. For what? What you sow, you will reap. See? And it's not a passage of judgment, it's a passage of love. It's a passage of God's love for us, that he's going to allow the consequences of choices to occur in our lives so that there's a congruity between what's on the inside and what's on the outside. See, and for Moses, what was on the inside did not match what was on the outside. On the outside, he learned from all of the great teachers of Egypt. He understood, Hebrews tells us, all the ways of the Egyptians. Moses was schooled in the best education possible of his day. And so on the outside, what did Moses look like? Strong, capable, intelligent leader. On the inside, there was still some stuff inside of Moses that didn't match the outside. And so life is about a process of, Nick and I were talking yesterday, this idea of integration, of integrating our lives, that what's on the inside and the outside is integrated. There's a unity, right? That's what an integer is. An integer is a whole number. There's a wholeness to my life. It's not fractionated. It's not one part here and one part here. There's an integration of the two worlds, of my inner world and my outer world. Paul says, pay careful attention then to how you walk, right? Making the most of the time that we've been given. Look at Proverbs 24. Go to Proverbs 24. Let me show you a few things here that kind of can easily get in the way. What would you say is man's or people's biggest problem that they deal with in life? Do you think it's the things outside of them, or do you think it's the things inside of them? Yeah. I'm one big self-inflicted wound. Right? Any other self-inflicted wounds? Right? We are walking self-inflicted wounds. And yet what's ironic is, you go to the average person, you go, hey man, how's it going? Man, it's tough. What's going on? Oh man, my boss this, and my wife this, and my kids this. And they look at everything outside of themselves and complain about everything outside of them, when the reality is that the biggest problem they're dealing with is what? Themselves. It's that for some reason, here's an honest answer, man, Walter, things are tough. Really, what's going on? Your boss? No. Your wife? No. What's the problem? Me! For some reason, I just lack the maturity and the courage to be the man I'm supposed to be. How about that for an answer? When's the last time you heard that answer, Dave? Hey man, how's it going? Oh man, I lack the maturity and the courage to be the man I'm supposed to be. Wow! Now we got something to work with. See, but when you're pointing your finger everywhere else, I can't help you. I can't do anything about your boss. I don't know him. But I know you. And I know that there's stuff in you because there's stuff in me. So let's just be honest about it. Right? I love Tony last week when Tony, or 2 weeks ago, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, your testimony? 2 weeks ago. Tony said something when you heard his testimony. It was awesome, by the way. I loved it. And at the end, he talked about the contrast between this little boy in him and the man, and that God was ready for him to be the man that he was meant to be. And Tony said at the very end, but you know what? That little boy is still there. And he still will creep his head every once in a while up, and Tony's got to shove him back under the water again, right? Drown that kid, right? And that little boy is going to be there till the day of your last breath, right? Day of your last breath. That little boy is going to be there, right? What did Paul say? When I was a child, what? I did the things of children, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. See? And so that's what we got to do. We're in the business of kind of putting away. Doesn't mean it's gone. It's not eradication. It's going to be there. And so time is important, because time is what forges who we are. Right? Look in Proverbs 24. I love this proverb. He says, I went by the field of a slacker. Actually, I prefer the word sluggard. Anybody have sluggard in your Bible? The sluggard. Verse 30, 24:30. I apologize. I went by the field of a slacker or a sluggard, the lazy man, and by the vineyard of one lacking sense. That word sense is literally this idea of the inner man, that there's something about the disposition of this person's heart that he lacks this inner will, this inner drive deep in his heart. And because of that, he's lazy. You ever see people like that? There's just no vision, there's no drive, there's no purpose that they're driven by. This is the person that is one who's lacking sense, right? It's the lack of this inner man drive in them. Thistles had come up everywhere. Weeds covered the ground. Look at this. The stone wall was ruined. How long do you have to ignore a stone wall for a stone wall to begin breaking down? Right? What's this guy doing with his property? What's it look like? It's overrun, man. Weeds and thistles. The stone wall is breaking down. He's not doing anything to upkeep it. Why? Why is he not doing anything? He's lazy, right? There's something in him that has not come alive. I looked at the contrast. I saw and took it to heart. It's the same word as the one above. And I took it to heart. It's that same word of that inner man. His is alive. He sees it. He looks at it. He observes it with intent. And he says, I saw it. I took it to heart. I looked and received instruction, or I received wisdom from this. You know what it is? Here's the instruction. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the arms to rest, and your poverty will come like a robber, and your need like a bandit. There it is. There's the wisdom. Where did he get this wisdom from, by the way? He got it from the Lord. Specifically, though, what's he doing? He's observing somebody else. He's looking out, and he's observing somebody else, and he's saying, that's what things will look like if I don't attend to the things of my heart. If I allow my heart to continue to be dead to the things that are most important in life, it'll be a life of thorns and thistles and broken down walls. Does that exist in our world? What do you think? You don't have to look very far, and you see this thing happening because the heart that inner man has not come alive to these things. Let me show you another one. Look at Proverbs 26. Just go over one page probably. Here's more of that self-inflicted wound. The slacker says, there's a lion in the road, a lion in the public square. In other words, this person is using an excuse. Fear is what keeps this person from taking action. Can fear paralyze a person from acting? What do you think? Of course, we know that. Fear is the very thing, most of the time, that keeps us from pursuing those things that maybe you might even feel called to do, but we're afraid and we don't do it. So you know what we do? We play it safe. We play it safe and we don't take action on those things that could yield enormous blessing and benefit in our lives. There's a sports psychologist that I read a number of years ago, and he used to have a thing in his office. He would have a balance beam, and he would have athletes come in that were struggling with the mental part of their game, and he would do this exercise with them. He would say, hey Steve, do you think you can walk across this balance beam? I think so. Let's see, show me. Steve would get up on that balance beam, he'd walk right across it, and then he'd say, Steve, can you walk across a balance beam? And now what would Steve say? Yeah. Could you do it again? I think so. Do it again. And Steve would get on that balance, and he'd make him do it again. And then he'd say, can you walk across a balance beam? And now what would he say? Yeah. Do it again. He gets on there, walks across it, this time a little quicker. Can you walk across a balance beam, he'd say? And he would do this 4, 5, 6 times. And finally, he'd say about the 6th or 7th time, can you walk across a balance beam? Now what are you saying?
Yes.
Yes! And he'd say, follow me. And he would take you to an adjacent room in his office. And it was a high ceiling room and it had a balance beam that was 8 feet in the air. And he'd say, do it again. And they wouldn't do it. Unless they were a gymnast. Nobody would do it. And he would say, the only thing that's changed is what? It's the height, which evokes what? Fear. It's the fear of failure now that keeps me from being able to perform at what I'm capable of doing. And he talks about how that fear is the very thing that hinders all optimal performance. It's standing over a 3-foot putt that you have to make to win the pot. And that 3-foot putt, Nick, looks like how long? 100-foot putt. You guys ever see that funny little meme? And it's this guy, he's putting, and he's about 6 feet from the hole, but the hole is like 12 feet big. And he's looking at it, and he's like shaking his head like this is going to be really tough. It's huge. The hole's huge. And he's looking at this like, I don't know if I can make it into that 12-foot hole. Right? That's kind of that's what fear does. See? That's the slacker here. He's going, there's a lion in the road. Right? There's a lion in the public square. And this is a person who's afraid. If you ever go to my website, you'll see that there's a quote that I've used as part of my business from day one. A guy named Andre Guide said this quote, and I loved it from day one. And it says this: in order to discover new lands, one must consent to lose sight of the shore. Right? What do you think is the most important word in that quote? In order to discover new lands, one must consent to lose sight of the shore. Consent. You have to be willing to let go of what?
Control.
What's that?
Control.
Might be control. Fear. What's that, buddy?
That's going to you have to let go of the familiar.
The familiar, the safe things, the things that make you feel comfortable, that I'm willing now to venture out beyond the shore where I can't see it anymore. Because as long as I can see the shore, guess what I will never see, Chris? What will I never see if I always see the shore?
The water.
I'll never see, well, I'm in the water, I'll never see the new lands, right? I'll never see another body of land because all I'll see is my shore. I got to leave that shore. I got to be willing to venture out, but I can't do that if I'm afraid of the lion in the road that's not really there. It's not just that. You know what else? 14, a door turns on its hinges and a slacker turns in his bed. See, a hinge is made for a door. So guess what a bed is made for? A slacker. And a door, if it's like my doors, when you close the door and open it, guess what that door does? It squeaks. And when you turn in your bed, like when I turn in my bed, guess what I do? I squeak. Y'all make that noise this morning, by the way? Tony didn't. He just hops right up. I know that. He doesn't make any noise when he gets up. He's just ready for the day.
You both need some oil.
Yeah, we need some more. I need Chad to come over and oil my doors. See? And just like a hinge is made for a door, a bed is made for a slacker. That's the idea. See? Man, I can't wait to go to bed tonight. Oh, you ever met someone that just loves sleep? I love sleep. You look at them and go, what is wrong with you? What do you mean you love sleep? You're going to get plenty of that someday. Verse 15, the slacker buries his hand in the bowl. He's too weary to bring it to his mouth. Now this is hyperbole, obviously, right? You're so lazy, you can just let your hand drop in the bowl of peanut M&Ms, but you don't have the strength to just bring it up to your mouth. You're so lazy, worthless, no good.
Bowl is oatmeal, bro.
What's that?
Bowl is oatmeal, bro.
Okay.
The M&M's you'd be able to do.
Dean, I like that you're here live, man. No, not just on the video. That's good. That's good. Look at this. 16. In his own eyes, a slacker is wiser than 7 who can answer sensibly. Why is that? Think about this. The lazy man, the sluggard, the slacker is wiser in his own eyes than 7 sensible people. What's this person always doing? You try to talk to him. You ever try to talk to the slacker? Always a reason. Right, Russell?
Smartest person in the room.
Smartest person in the room. There's always a reason why. Why I can't. Why it won't work. Why there's no point. It's no point. Why is there no point? It's just no point. Just no reason. No, the reason is because the effort is too great. Because you have not developed, last week, the character to take the hard road over the easy road. And so now you're taking the easy road, and so now you're made for your bed. See? You're made for your bed. And the Proverbs are very clear here that the wise man is the one who takes the days that he's been given, which are a gift from God, and he pays careful attention to them. He pays careful attention to them because these days are meant for us to be what God has called us to be. So what does that mean? Well, look at Mark 1. Let me show you something in Mark 1 real quick. I want to show you this great passage here. Mark 1. Starting in verse 29. I want you to write down, if you got a pen, I want you to write down that part of the goal as leaders is personal spiritual renewal. We have to make time for personal spiritual renewal so that over time we become what God has called us to be. You know what phrase is the most common phrase in the book of Numbers? As Moses is going through the wilderness journey with the nation, with the people, it's, and God spoke unto Moses. And God spoke unto Moses. And it was Moses' time with the Lord. Why did Moses need time with the Lord? He needed it because his management principles weren't enough. See, he needed spiritual renewal. He needed a word from God. He needed time with God. He had to go up to the mountain alone and spend time with God. And not just Moses, but look who else. Verse 29. As soon as they left the synagogue, they went into Simon and Andrew's house with James and John. Simon's mother-in-law, so Peter, was married. Simon's mother-in-law was lying in bed with a fever, and they told him about her at once. So he went to her, took her by the hand, raised her up. The fever left her, and she began to serve them. Jesus heals Peter's mother-in-law, which many people believe is why Peter later denied him. Verse 32. When evening came, after the sun had set, they brought to him all those who were sick and demon-possessed. The whole town was assembled at the door. Can you imagine that picture? Everybody's at the door of Jesus here, wanting him to what? Heal them, deliver them. And he healed many who were sick in various diseases and drove out many demons. And he would not permit the demons to speak because they knew him. I want you to picture this for a moment. I've given you this picture before. I remember when I read this, I really kind of saw this picture of Jesus. There's a line of people who have had these maladies all of their life, who the pool of Siloam failed them time and time and time again. And all the things people told them of what to do to get healing always failed them. Nothing worked. And suddenly, here comes this man who they begin to hear the stories, and they begin to meet the people who say, he healed me. He touched me. I couldn't hear, now I hear. I couldn't see, now I see. And now people are flocking to this guy. It's the first real hope that they have. And they're lined up out the door by the hundreds. And all night long and all morning long, Jesus in his compassion is touching and healing one by one. And you're 300th in line. You're a half a mile down the road. Can't wait for your turn. And then you're 100th in line. Now you can kind of see inside that door. Then you're 20th. It's almost your time. Heath, it's almost your time. You're 20. Now you're 10th. You're 10th in line. Now you're third. There's 2 people in front of you, Chris. You finally get to have that removed that you've had all your life. It's finally going to be removed and healed. And then you're next. You're next. Verse 35. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he got up, went out, and made his way to a deserted place. And there he was praying. What did Jesus have to do? He had to renew. He had to leave. At some point, there was the next person. It was Steve with his hip and his knees and his back and his neck.
Keith.
And he's next. And he can't wait. And all of a sudden, where'd he go? He left. What? What? I was next. That'd be a great title for a book.
No, but Steve read Romans,
I was.
so he knows that God has mercy on whom he has mercy.
Oh, there you go. There you
So
go.
he was good with it.
Well, Romans hadn't been written yet.
Fair enough.
All right.
Steve had neither.
That's true.
Or he had.
Thank you, Father.
Okay, isn't that amazing? And Jesus, in that moment, there was a moment when what was the most important thing to Jesus? Being with the people, healing them, celebrating, laughing, having joy with them, watching their lives be changed anew. But all of a sudden, Jesus recognizes at a point in time that what? What now becomes most important?
Him.
I now have to go be with my Father. And he has to go off and be alone. And he has to take that which is important and he has to now move away from that to go be to that which is most important. And guys, listen, if there is a secret and there are no secrets, if there's a key and there are no keys, but if there were, that is the secret to really achieving the things that God has called us to, and that is the recognition of what is the most important thing that I need to be doing at any given time. I tell people all the time, when I travel and I'm gone 2 or 3 days and I come home, there's 3 things I'm always confronted by that are all important, but only one is most important in that moment. When I walk in to my kitchen, I pull my car into the driveway or in the garage, I come into the kitchen, Stacy is there, usually right there in the kitchen. My dog is right there, and there's a stack of mail right there on the counter. And all 3 are important, but only one in my first act is most important, right? Which one is that? The dog. And if I choose what's important to the neglect of what's most important, it is a deposit towards something that I don't want. It's a deposit towards something I don't want, right? And so I embrace Stacy. Baby, big hug, sit down. How was your trip? How are you? Take 10 minutes, visit about the day, visit about the trip, whatever it is. Then go to my dog, pick her up. And then go to the mail, go through the mail, right? And at any given moment, I've got to ask myself, what's most important right now? The other morning, when was it? Yesterday morning, Stacy had asked me, she said, we've got this ridiculous tree, which by the way, you can have. We're giving it away. It's this heavy, I can't say it on camera, 12-foot tree that we're about ready to get rid of. And Stacy said, hey, I've got my group of ladies coming over Friday morning. Could you make sure to take the tree down? The ornaments are already off. Just take the tree apart and put it up in the attic before Friday morning. I said, yes, you bet I will. That's most important. Well, we had somebody come into our house yesterday and she said, I'd really love to get that tree done before they get here at 8 o'clock Thursday morning. Well, that squeezes my time frame. All right? I had already mentally, emotionally prayed up to have it done by Friday. And so I was going to do it Wednesday night. Well, we went to dinner, got back about 10 o'clock at night. I looked at that tree. I'm like, I'm not doing that. I get up in the morning, it's 5:30, whatever, 5:45. I get up in the morning. I'm sitting at my table. I'm just studying. I'm reading. And the tree's on my mind. Like, I know this lady's coming at 8 in the morning. Stacy really wanted this to be taken down. She originally said Friday, though. So I probably could have gotten away with it. And I got a terrible back. I'm like you, Chris. I got a terrible back. And so I'm like, ah. And so at 7:50, I waited till 7:15. It's so me. It's so me. I wait till 7:15. I'm like, I'm about to be a man. Put away childish things. I get up, man. I go get my ladder, and I start taking that tree down. And it was that first piece. It's a double piece because it's so tall. I have to take one on top, and it's heavy. And I'm like shimmying it up, and I'm like, and I'm shaking, and I pop that thing up off the tree, and and I felt it, bam, right there. I just felt it hit me. And I take that thing down off actually I threw it on the floor. And then I get down, I carry the thing upstairs, and anyway, take the tree down. Stacy came in and said, well, oh my gosh, what are you doing? I was like, well, I got to take the tree down. We got it done by 7:45. It was awesome. Got the whole thing down. I don't care that I hurt my back. I mean, I do, but I don't. You know what, honestly, you know what I cared about the most? There was a day that tree would have been up till Thursday night or Friday morning. And I would have, you said Friday morning. See? But I want to be the kind of man, and I'm so far from it, I want to be the kind of man that if my wife says, I'd love to have it up before Thursday morning to 8 when this person is coming, I want to be the kind of man that says, just do it, get it done. And so for me, taking the time to say, what is most important? Is it time in God's Word? Because I was having a great time of study. Man, it was rich. What do you think was more important in that moment, Chris? Was it studying Ephesians or taking down that tree? What was most important at 7:15 in the morning, do you think?
It's your heart.
It's your heart, yeah. I'm asking the wrong guy. No, what is it?
Take care of your life.
Taking care of being the man I'm called to be, right? Loving my wife, doing those things that are meant to do, things I don't want to do. See, because when confronted by two choices, the harder of the two choices is almost always the better choice, right? Live with that principle in life, right? That'll take you a long way. When confronted by two choices, the harder of the two choices is almost always the better choice. And in that moment, the better choice was, Walter, get up out of this comfortable cushioned chair and go get on that ladder and start taking that tree down, right? Because that's character forming in you. And so learning to spend my time on the most important things was key. See? Now, I needed time for spiritual renewal, spending time with the Lord, spending time in His Word. But then there was a moment, believe it or not, was there a moment when Jesus had to stop and leave being alone with the Father to go about the Father's business? What do you think? Does it say, and Jesus remaineth with the Fathereth for the rest of His days on the mountain? No. And Jesus then left and He went about, right? He went about and did the work of the Lord. Remember when the Mount Transfiguration? Remember who was on the top of the mountain with Jesus? Remember who was? Peter, John. They were up there, and then who shows up? What a trip. Elijah and Moses. They suddenly materialize. What does Peter say?
Let's build them houses.
This is a good thing, Lord. Let's build some houses up here. Let's just stay up here. Peter, Jesus looks at Peter, is like, Peter, you don't know what you're saying. You don't know what you're saying. See, because Peter, when we go down from this mountain, there's going to be people suffering. They're going to be in agony. And you want the ecstasy of being up on this mountain, but you can never have the ecstasy until you're willing to go back down into the agony of the world and serve in the world. See, Jesus had to leave the ecstasy of being alone with the Father, and He had to go into the agony of the sufferings of people. And I had to leave the ecstasy of Ephesians to the agony of taking down this ridiculous tree, right? And it's all part of character formation. Now, that's my only winning story of the week. So I had to tell it to you. A lot of losses along the way. That's my winning story. All right? But hey, only that there would be more wins along the way. So this is what Jesus does. He leaves and he goes to be with the Father and he comes back. We have to recognize to ourselves that we are people that have got to be able to identify what is most important and then have the character, last week, have the character, the strength of character to do what's difficult when what's easy is available. Let me give you the last thing and then we're going to be done. Go to Matthew 25 real quick. Matthew 25. The last area of managing our time is in the areas of being prepared for our Lord. Using our time to have our hearts, our lives prepared for the Lord whenever He shall return. And in the story, Jesus tells the story of the parable of the 10 virgins. Remember the story? We won't go through the whole story. Remember the story? 5 have what? Enough oil. 5 don't. They ask the ones with the oil, can you give us some of your oil? What do they say? We don't have enough. Go to the market and buy some. See, they weren't what? They weren't prepared. Go to the market and buy some. They go to the market to go buy some oil. What happens, Chad, while they're gone at the market buying oil? Do you remember? The bridegroom returns. And all of us, they missed it. The banquet happens. The feast is happening. The doors are locked. They come back and they can't get into the party because there was not preparation. They didn't make plans and preparation for the Lord's return. This is the story Jesus tells about the importance of using our time to be prepared for His return at any time, that our lives and our hearts are in process of being prepared for His return. Right after that, you've got the parable of the talents. Remember that one? What is it? The 5, the 2, and the 1? The 5 and the 2, what do they end up doing, buddy? They double it. And what does the master say to them? Well done. Does he say that to the second one too?
Not in Luke 19 where that happens, but I think he does.
Okay. He said, well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I'll put you in charge of many. The man with 2 talents approached. He said, Master, you gave me 2 talents. I've earned 2 more. He said, well done, good and faithful servant.
In Luke 19, where he changes meanness, he only says that to the first one.
Okay. Well, in Matthew 25, he's telling him, well done. Right? That's where I am. I'm in Matthew 25, buddy, not Luke 19. He's got 1 talent. This guy's 1 talent. What's he do? He buries it. You're a severe master. I know that. Here's your 1 talent back. Right? And what does the master say?
Should have just put it in the bank.
Yeah, just, what are you doing? Right? You didn't plan and prepare for my return very well. See, there's an element where our time needs to be spent in preparation for the Lord, for the Lord's return, that we should be about personal renewal, growing our lives, spending time, reproducing the things that God is honored by reproducing, right? Spending time with His people, spending time with others, reaching out. This is biblical leadership, is being this person who is someone who is leading people to the way of the Lord, to make Him pleasing and appealing to all men, right? Time. It's the most important thing we've been given by God is time. We talk about taking it for granted, isn't it? I mean, we talk all the time about, hey, we all do it. Man, I'm taking a trip in June. Really? Are you now? Oh yeah, man, I can't wait. 7 days. I'm going to do a European tour, June 16th to 23rd. Wow, praise the Lord. Hope you make it to June, whatever. See, we just speak with such presumption sometimes over time. But You know, in the Puritans used to end their letters with this phrase, and the phrase was, if God wills. If God wills. And it was just a humble recognition that the time I have is not my own. The time I have is the time God has given me. And if God wills, then I will do these things, right? So we want to be humble with our time. What's that?
James said, don't say you're going to go do this or that.
That's right, yeah. I mean, we could have gone into the parable of the rich man, right? Remember what he said? Boy, I've built up many things, many barns, stored up many treasures for myself. Boy, what's he going to do now? Man, I'm going to build more and do this, and basically I'm just going to kick back and just enjoy. Look what I built. And it's the only person in the Bible that directly is called by God, what? A fool. Thou fool. Right? For your soul is required of you. See? Spent all of his life. It's not that he was rich. It's not that he was industrious. And not that he was creative and did all these things. Is that he did it all and it was I, me, my. And there was no sense that the time that he had was given by God to use his gifts, his talents, and his abilities to honor God in his kingdom. Right? So, let's spend our time well. Let me pray.